Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey friends, I'm Jill Castle, a pediatric dietitian, mom to 4 kids, and host of this podcast. I started this podcast in 2016 as a way to help families and healthcare professionals learn more about nutrition and feeding kids. My goal has always been to make nourishing your families easier through breaking down science into understandable concepts you can put into practice right away, and shedding light on and improving the emotional well-being of kids through feeding and food. You can always go deeper on my website, thenourishchild.com, where I have resources for children ages birth through teen. I'm always so grateful you're here, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hey friends, welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast and Happy New Year. This is Jill, your host of this podcast, and it's been a long time since I've done a solo episode, but I've decided as 2023 rolls on, you're going to be hearing from me a little bit more. You'll still hear from my guest experts throughout the rest of this season, but I've decided to pop in a few times as year rolls on and share some brief podcast episodes with you, basically because I have burning things on my mind that I want to share with you. So in this episode, I'm covering 5 mindset shifts for 2023. And you might be wondering where these come from. Personally, I do like a good mindset shift. I think I and probably a lot of us get stuck in our ways of thinking, and reflecting on mindset shifts or pushing myself to think in different ways and to learn different things pushes me outside of my comfort zone. So I have 5 reframes, if you will, that I'd like to share with you. This is going to be a short and sweet episode. You can listen to this. Obviously, if you are listening to this, you're probably on Apple Podcasts or someplace where you listen to podcasts. But I typically, when I interview expert guests, I have them on YouTube as well. This won't be on YouTube in terms of a video. However, you could listen to it there. But I have several other interviews from this year that are on YouTube, plus on Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to audio. So when I do a solo, it'll just be audio, the classic traditional way to podcast. However, if you are interested in topics like your child's eating behaviors or weight stigma or extreme picky eating, I've got those with guest experts already bundled up and airing as a video on YouTube. So if you're interested in seeing the experts and hearing what they have to say, that's where to go to watch them. Okay, so the 5 mindset reframes that I want to cover today are the following. Number 1, add in versus take out. Number 2, include versus exclude. Number 3, build up versus tear down. Number 4, introduce versus eliminate. And the last one, number 5, is NATO versus Tato. So stick around so you understand what NATO and Tato are. Okay, so let's talk about the first one, add in versus take out. This has been a long-term philosophy of mine as a pediatric dietitian. I used it in counseling families when I was in private practice. It's just, to me, it's just an easy way to go when we're talking about food and improving food choices or eating habits. And that is to find ways to add in nutritious foods rather than take out indulgent or quote unquote bad foods. So for example, how this could play out if your child wants ice cream, instead of saying no to ice cream, what you could do instead, following this add-in principle, is to make the food request more nutritious. So for example, You could add nuts to the ice cream. You could add a side of fruit served along with the ice cream. There's lots of different things. Granola on top. But the whole concept of adding in versus taking out focuses on a more positive mindset. It focuses on possibility. It focuses on growth and enjoyment rather than take out, which focuses on scarcity or forbidden foods. So remember, we build a nutritious diet one food at a time. And if you can find ways to add in nutritious foods, that's awesome. Okay, let's talk about the second mindset reframe, which is include versus exclude or even shun. So I really came to this idea because I've been thinking a lot about kids and their bodies as I write this book, Size-Wise. And I wanted to sort of showcase this mindset shift from excluding or shunning kids based on their bodies, whether they be smaller bodies or larger bodies, and instead be conscious of including all kids and all bodies. And I do believe this takes effort. That's why it's a reframe for me, because I think that, and why I want to share it with you, because our societal norms are to value average or thin bodies and discriminate against larger bodies or even children in smaller bodies. And so I want us to focus more on including everyone, regardless of body size, rather than excluding or shunning a child based on the way that they look or their appearance.
Kids change a lot. Their nutrition needs, eating habits, and food preferences do too. So much so, it can be hard to keep up. The Nourished Child, a website designed for parents who want more nutrition education, helps parents like you get crystal clear on raising good eaters. We've cracked the code on nourishing the whole child, whether you're raising a baby, a teen, or a child with health concerns. Our nutrition school and parent education programs help you get the inside scoop on food and nutrients, positive food parenting, and building self-motivated, autonomous kids who are good eaters. Visit thenourishedchild.com today.
So an example of not making this mindset shift would be assuming a child in a larger body is unhealthy or unwell. That's an unfair assumption, and it's not a truth assumption. It's an assumption based on bias. Another one is if a child has a smaller body, assuming that they are weak. Again, this is based on bias, not necessarily truth. When we respect and include all bodies, we begin to build up children for who they are. We end up focusing on their characteristics and their worth, not attaching their value to what they look like. So that is that second mindset shift. Again, include versus exclude or shun. The third mindset reframe for 2023 is build up versus tear down. So this is really around focusing on your child's inner qualities, things like loyalty, truthfulness, stick-to-itness, those types of qualities, and reinforcing them, building them up, rather than focusing on their shortcomings, which can erode their self-esteem and their worthiness, and, frankly, can tear them down. So an example would be criticizing your child about their eating habits, such as pickiness. Instead, let's try to embrace pickiness. Because for many kids, it's a way of eating that allows them to stay safe while slowly exploring new foods. If we call our child a picky eater, or we complain or criticize about their pickiness, we are chipping away, potentially, at their self-esteem and their feeling of worthiness. this tears them down. And so the shift is, instead of tearing down your child, or any child for that matter, let's build them up. The fourth mindset shift is introduce versus eliminate. And when I think of introduce, I'm thinking of things like introducing new foods, which is kind of the obvious thing, but also introducing or encouraging fun with eating, enjoyment of flavors. Again, rather than eliminating foods your child won't eat or doesn't like. So instead of eliminating, we're introducing. So for example, let's say your child, quote unquote, yucks broccoli. So you just stop offering it. Instead, keep making it and offering it and show your child how much you enjoy eating it. You've checked off the responsibility as the food leader in your family when you do this. When we include, we're just giving children opportunities. And really, when we do that, we need to let go of this expectation that just because we made it, they need to eat it. On the other hand, we don't want to just eliminate the foods that our kids haven't warmed up to yet. Eliminating foods shortchanges a child's ability to learn about food. And so we don't want to make that mistake either. So that's where my next and my last mindset shift for you comes into play. NATO versus TATO. So NATO, N-A-T-O, stands for not attached to outcomes, versus TATO, or T-A-T-O, stands for too attached to outcomes. So I use NATO. I adopted NATO for my golf game years ago, and I think it can be really useful for feeding kids. I simply have decided that I'm not attached to the outcomes that happen when I play golf. Whether I shank a golf ball in the woods or birdie a hole, and I've done both, I'm not attached to being a bad golfer or a good golfer. I'm attached, rather, to playing, to being outside on a nice day, to being with friends. It helps me appreciate the game and not beat myself up when I'm less than perfect. The opposite, TATO, is when you're too attached to outcomes, like whether your kid eats broccoli or willingly moves his body each day. TATO causes you to be disappointed. It causes your expectations to not be met. When this happens, you get disappointed in yourself and you get disappointed in your kid. Instead, focus on the process of learning, the long term, and the end goal. Being NATO, or going NATO, not attached to outcomes, means that you aren't focusing on some goal you have for your child. You aren't focusing in the moment. You're really just focusing on the process and letting go any expectations. So that's my 5 mindset reframes for 2023. Not too terribly much about food, but more about the attachment that you're building with your child as a parent and a feeder of the family. I'm curious, of all these mindset reframes, which one speaks to you? Which will you try first? I would like to know, so shoot me an email or hang out on Instagram, where you can find me at the.nourishedchild or i.am.pd, PEDIRD. Let me know. Let me know which mindset frame will you be focusing on. And if you want more in-depth resources on nutrition and feeding your child, you can head over to thenourishedchild.com. I have articles, other podcasts, workshops, printables, books, ebooks, lots of resources over there for you. That's it for today, folks. I hope you have a killer 2023 and that this year has gotten off on the right foot for you. Always, always, always make sure to give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.